Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. The War Bride's Oath. Episode 18. Back in one of the castle's highest towers, Cecilia's fierce fight against Giselle and her red dragon had gotten more violent, more beastly. Combined with the princess' new appearance, she was also seemingly much stronger. The young red dragon kept pouncing on her like a cat trying to kill a rat, but she just wasn't letting herself be killed. Cecilia was moving fast, like a dragon, slithering through the attacks, fighting back as if her opponent wasn't a furious creature 3 times her size. The claws kept digging through the stone, wrecking what was once a gorgeous banquet hall, now reduced to 2 walls and a large mountain of rubble. As most of the roof had been brought down, a lot of the rain was pouring in, making the whole floor quite easy to slip on when it wasn't unstable from all the debris scattered around. Each time Cecilia found herself against a wall, she had to watch just as much for the dragon as she did for the falling of broken bricks. Still, she wasn't retreating from this fight. Her new, shining silver scales were glowing like a light in the darkness, beautiful and eerie on her skin. She had taken off most of her armor and her dragon blood was now taking over in making her skin thicker, tougher. The external injuries were closing up and healing at an incredible speed, but she could still feel the vivid pain inside. Her organs weren't as quick to heal as her skin was, so she couldn't move at her full speed, but she sure was trying. Jin had to find ways to relentlessly attack her while also finding a precarious equilibrium on the tower the rest of its body was gradually ruining. This banquet hall was absolutely not the right size to welcome one whole dragon, even a young one, and the red dragon was just destroying everything mindlessly. Cecilia wouldn't have cared less about Jin destroying the whole tower, if it wasn't for the fact that she was still in it and feeling the tower getting less and less stable. Somehow, the dragon's lower body also kept scratching the lower floors as it tried to climb, and all the jumping and scratching was causing the whole building to become off balance, weakening it. The more she fought, ran, and jumped to fight back against the unruly dragon, the less stable she felt the ground under her. If she didn't finish this soon, chances were the whole tower would collapse, and dragon blood couldn't save a crushed body. The fighting itself was already hard enough as it was. Few men could have ever claimed to have fought a dragon alone, and Cecilia was probably the only woman capable of doing so. She was fierce, grunting and groaning every time she thrusted her sword. Her anger was on par with Jin's furious growls, the 2 of them fighting like irate beasts wanting nothing more than to rip each other apart. The large claws got very close to her many times, sometimes ripping the floor and digging several inches into the stone right next to her legs. Every time Jin pounced on her, Cecilia would retaliate by slicing the dragon or piercing it. Her sword was hanging on just fine, and as it was made of dragon claw, it could pierce the red dragon's skin while making big holes, not just a clean cut like a normal blade would have. Even if it wasn't always as deep and large as she had hoped, bit by bit, more and more injuries were appearing on Jin's body. The dragon was getting madder each time, trying to kill her even more vehemently, forcing Cecilia to be on the move always. She couldn't get a single second of rest, aside from the very few times she managed to jump away or run to the opposite side. She could barely catch her breath and wipe the sweat and rain off her face before she had to get moving again. It was a dance of death, in which whoever slowed down saw their blood shed. Her hair was drenched, and she had ripped apart the hem of her dress that hindered her already. There wasn't much left of the original outfit, leaving Cecilia covered only by some purple armor and her silver magenta scales more than the dark brown pieces of fabric. It was better for her though, as it made her movements easier, and she needed any mobility she could get. The rain was dripping down her whole body, soaking the ground and slowly transforming the floor of the former hall into a water rink. Despite how fast she moved and how careful she was, Cecilia slid several times against the wet stone, almost impaling herself on the dragon's fangs a couple of times. She was only glad her dragon blood was more fired up than ever. The piles of debris would have ruined her feet and legs with multiple scratches if they weren't already covered in scales. There were few portions of the hall left that weren't covered by broken stones and debris, and she had to navigate through the mess while fighting a dragon that couldn't have cared less. Jin had no issues climbing over the hills of broken walls to jump on her, fangs first, and try to bite her head or arm off. Cecilia had to run, dive behind whatever obstacles she could find between her and the dragon and find the first occasion to retaliate. Despite being at a clear disadvantage, the princess was unrelenting, and not giving the beast an easy fight. Cecilia was stronger, fiercer than ever, and didn't back down, even when she was injured again. It happened after she had tripped once more and almost ripped her foot open on some sharp piece of metal. She fell down to the side, and immediately rolled on the ground to avoid being impaled by one of Jin's sharp claws by less than an inch. When she jumped back on her feet, out of breath but sword ready, her entire right flank was bleeding out, covered in many little and middle-sized cuts. Immediately, the fresh wounds were quickly covered by a new shimmer of silver scales, her skin fighting the injuries with her as fast as the eye could see. The more that fight continued, the less human she looked. Silver scales were now covering more than half of her visible skin, and at each bolt of lightning that enlightened the sky, her scales shimmered too. "Just get rid of her already," shouted Giselle, furious. "Just kill her." Cecilia wasn't going to let herself be killed, not so easily. That measly dragon didn't scare her one bit, and she refused to lose against Giselle. Every time she had to jump to avoid the dragon's attack, she made sure to keep an eye on that woman. Cecilia could forgive the dragon, perhaps, but she wasn't going to let Giselle get away with it twice. That woman had chosen her path, now it was time she paid for it. "Just come out and fight me yourself then," she grunted, raising her sword again. Jin furiously growled, and Cecilia saw the dragon take a large, deep breath that couldn't mean anything good. She ran to hide behind a pile of wreckage and covered her head seconds before the large, hot flames burst out. The heat rose in a blink, and Cecilia felt the flames lick her arms, her legs, and everything around. The dragon's furious fiery breath lasted for just a few terrifying seconds. Although her body had some immunity to it thanks to the dragon blood, she knew a dragon's fire was too powerful. She tried to endure it, feeling her silver scales rush to heal as fast as they got burned, trying to keep her alive despite the cataclysmic fire directed against her. Cecilia tried to protect her face, but she felt every part of her body itching, burning terribly. It was only a matter of seconds, but those seconds felt way too long. When it finally stopped, she was still way too hot, and she could smell burnt flesh. She looked at her limbs, relieved to see several thick layers of scales had appeared to protect the exposed parts. Then, she smelled flames still burning, and realized some of her hair had caught fire. Without hesitation, Cecilia grabbed the locks and cut it off. Some of her hair was now cut to neck length, but she didn't have the time to wonder how it looked. She immediately began running, ignoring the pain still stinging her forearm and legs, and jumped, aiming for Jin's back. Cecilia knew dragons spitting fire had to take a few seconds to calm down, and she had to use that time. She violently stabbed her whole sword through the dragon's left flank, and half a second later, Jin's furious growl thundered. Disoriented by the pain that pierced its flesh, the red dragon writhed erratically, more violent than ever. It sent Cecilia flying off of its back, separating her from the sword still planted in its back. She felt herself hit the ground violently 1 second before Gisel's scream echoed her dragons. Cecilia grimaced. With the speed and violence she had landed, even if the floor had been cleared of debris, it would have been painful, but now, she could feel several parts of her body in a tremendous amount of pain. Luckily, she wasn't the only one. Still panicked by the weapon planted in its back, Jin kept squirming and groaning, the red dragon going into a complete frenzy. The crazy rampage was just about destroying anything left in the room, spilling debris everywhere and collapsing the remaining walls. Still lying on her stomach, Cecilia tried to raise her head with a groan of pain, her green eyes immediately falling on the doors leading to the lower floors which had miraculously kept standing until then. If she entertained any dream of escaping this way, they were brutally crushed. In its madness, Jin wrecked them, and the wall collapsed on it, along with whatever was left behind. Cecilia let out an annoyed groan. Now she was truly trapped here, unless the rest of the tower collapsed, which didn't seem impossible. Jin's rampage hadn't just damaged the remaining walls, the floor was now literally swaying under them. Cecilia's heart dropped to her stomach as she felt the tower tilt more and more. By reflex, she grabbed the first hole she could find in the ground, and held on, hoping this would stop soon. Sadly, it wasn't. She heard a terrible sound somewhere beneath, something akin to a landslide or an earthquake, and the ground under her kept tilting and tilting. She could feel her body getting pushed toward the edge, leaning dangerously to the side that was collapsing. If she let go, just for a second, her body would inevitably slide down and fall off of the tower. She closed her eyes, trying to calm her crazy heartbeat and the blood pulsing in her head. She didn't even want to think about whether the sea or the rest of the castle was waiting below. All the dragon blood in the world wouldn't be able to save her from such a fall. Ha! Cecilia forced herself to look in the opposite direction. Annoyed, she saw Giselle, holding on to her dragon herself and, with her free hand, wielding Cecilia's dragon claw sword she had left in the wound. She had visibly ripped it out, waving around the blood-soaked weapon while her dragon had calmed down a bit. Jin was still furiously growling, its wound bleeding out and the red body squirming still, arched as an indication of its suffering. "What is it, princess? Can't keep up after all," she mocked her. "Stop it, Giselle!" Cecilia shouted back. "Both you and your dragon are going to die. If you stop now, we might spare you." "Shut up! Look at you, princess, you're about to die. And you want me to beg for mercy? No. I have come this far by bowing to everyone, and now, I have a dragon princess groveling under me. I'm going to watch you die, and then I'll show Ashen how he picked the wrong, weak woman. I'm not weak, grunted Cecilia. She used the strength in her arms and tried to pull herself up, working her muscles all she could to win just a few inches up. The tower was leaning so badly, it was even impressive it was still standing. The top of the building could just collapse at any moment, and Cecilia could hear the stones slowly creaking and about to crumble underneath. She could only use the strength of her arms to hold on, painfully. Steps away and somehow above her, Giselle was holding on to her dragon, ready to jump on and fly off the second the tower finally collapsed. Cecilia glared at her. She refused to not finish this fight. A fitting end for a coward princess, scoffed Giselle, getting more brazen from her position. You'll die alone, a defeat fitting for the pathetic excuse of a war god's daughter. Cecilia's green eyes glared even more furiously. Almost all of her skin was covered in blood and silver scales by now, and only the 2 green gems could be seen in the midst of her wet hair stuck to her face. Despite her position, her body almost completely hanging above the ground, there wasn't an ounce of fear in them. Far, far below, she could hear the clamor of the men fighting, the terrible sounds of a war that was spreading throughout the island. The thunder was beating like drums above them as if to give rhythm to the ongoing battles. But even louder were the waves crashing against the rocks below. Cecilia frowned and glanced down. The sea sounded almost as furious as the roaring sky. Ignoring Giselle, she listened some more, something suddenly pulling her attention. A sound, something familiar yet foreign, coming like a muted echo. Her heartbeat accelerated again. Her blood rushed through her veins, and an excited chill went down her spine. She could hear it. Below the furious roars of the raging sea, far past the edges of the island. Lightning struck the sky again, and when Giselle looked down at Cecilia, prepared to see her give up or beg for help, she was shocked to find the princess smiling. I'm no coward, Giselle. You are. Then, she suddenly let go. Silence dropped on the area, and Giselle watched the princess' body fall off of the tower, almost in slow motion. Cecilia fell backwards, facing the sky, and her eyes locked on Giselle with a scary satisfied expression. Snapped up by the void underneath, her body floated in the air, in a cross, and she slowly closed her eyes, disappearing in the shadows of the building, toward the seething sea. That's the precise moment the building chose to collapse. In a crescendo of rock-breaking sounds, it slowly fell apart, collapsing in parts and taking the floors below down with it. Giselle only had time to hop onto her dragon as Jin flapped its small wings to get above the wreckage. She watched an entire portion of the castle fall below them into large clouds of dust. Some parts violently hit and damaged other parts of the castle, but most fell into the surrounding sea, disappearing into the waves. Giselle didn't care at all for the tower. Her eyes were relentlessly looking for one woman's silhouette. It made no sense that she would have survived this. Not only because a fall from such a height should have killed her, but even if she somehow survived, the collapsing bricks and stones should have buried her in the waves. No one could survive that. So why did she have the feeling the princess had survived anyway? She had clearly chosen to let go. What kind of madness had prompted that jump? Giselle kept looking through the waves, as the tower had finished collapsing, reduced to a shapeless mountain on one side of the castle. The sea was unusually restless too, as if it was preparing to grow and eat up the nearby islands. That princess had to have drowned by now. Still, Giselle couldn't breathe properly, her anxiety soaring. Her eye caught something under the water. It was just a glimpse, out of the corner of her eye, but she was almost sure she had seen something shining, a shimmer of silver. A cold chill went down her spine, and she jumped in fright as the thunder suddenly boomed above. Then, she heard it very clearly. The high-pitched, almost metallic scream of a water dragon. Giselle opened her eyes wide, fear filling her expression. It couldn't be. She heard it again, even louder. It was as if it was coming from the entire sea below, the water acting like a fearsome echo chamber for a very large creature. She grabbed her dragon and prompted it to get away, quickly. Jin was getting nervous too. Suddenly, a gigantic wave burst out of the sea, climbing high toward the sky. In the midst of it, a large creature suddenly soared, letting out that furious scream from before, even clearer and more piercing. A gigantic water dragon, with silver scales shimmering like diamonds, and furious, dark pink ruby eyes. The mythical creature extended its wings, flapping them like an icy cold mist whipping the air, and screamed again in fury, showing its snow-white but sharp fangs. On the top of its head, Cecilia was standing, the blood washed off her body, her scales the same color and her eyes cold as ice. "We're not done, Giselle." She saw the other woman's expression fall, very quickly, from shock to absolute terror. Giselle grabbed her dragon's head, and pulled it to fly away as fast as it could and away from her. Cecilia glared at the fleeing figure of the red dragon, but first, she got down on her knees, putting her hands on the silver dragon's head. "I missed you so much, Cis," she muttered in a cry. "Thank you for coming back." Her dragon answered with that unique, metallic scream unlike any other dragon. Cis wasn't like any other dragon anymore, and the silver dragon was absolutely magnificent. Its scales were like thousands of perfectly shaped jewels on its body, shimmering every time the light hit them. They were incredibly cold too, perhaps because Cis had emerged from the sea, and they looked almost like ice gems under her fingers. Her dragon was 3 times bigger than Cecilia remembered, and its wings too, were effortlessly flapping in the sky, grand and capable of keeping the large body flying without a problem. Cis was effortlessly hanging in the sky like a silver cross visible from all sides of the capital. To Cecilia, though, nothing mattered more than those gorgeous ruby eyes, staring right back at her. It was as if they had parted just yesterday. Despite the new, grand appearance, it was still her Cis underneath, her dragon which she felt more connected to than ever. From where she stood, it was difficult to spot, but Cecilia did notice the large, burgundy mark on her dragon's throat. It was one perfect line, almost like a collar, but to her, it had a terrible significance. As if, even if she had retrieved her dragon, this scar was to stay as a reminder never to make the same mistake again. Cecilia sighed. She had no idea why Cis had come back so different, but she could feel their bond stronger than before. Her dragon was stronger than before. Like the sea dragon god of the legend, the silver dragon was flying above the sea with shining scales and an imposing presence. Cecilia could almost feel the power in each movement, and she could feel, deep inside, Ceci's strength adding to hers. They were one, once again. Her dragon flapped its gorgeous wings, taking a more horizontal position, and she sat on its nape. It didn't take long to find Jin. The red dragon's figure was standing out against the dark grey and blue background of the raging sea and thundering storm above them. Cease let out another unique high-pitched growl, and jumped down in that direction. Either Jin felt the other dragon coming or was trying to flee anyway, but both dragons accelerated, and the hunt quickly began in the sky. It was a furious race against one another. Cecilia had to hang on to her dragon or, at the speed Cease was going, she'd be violently thrown off. Still, she kept both eyes open and fixed right ahead at Giselle and her red dragon. Unlike them, the connection between those two was obviously off. In fact, whenever Cease got close enough, Cecilia could hear Giselle's furious screams, and see the fear in Jin's eyes. The red dragon was just terrified. Cease was much bigger and in a predatory position too. Claws out, if the silver dragon got close enough, no doubt blood would soon flow. As young of a dragon as Jin was, its goal was most likely to survive and protect Giselle too. Sadly, that woman looked beyond mad now. Something seemed to have snapped in her, enough for her to curse at her dragon that was fleeing this fight. Either she truly believed they had a chance, or she just refused to back down. She was just vociferating at Cecilia and Cease, shouting for Jin to turn around and fight. That wouldn't happen as long as the red dragon was in its right mind. Get them, Cease! Her dragon let out another long scream in the sky and accelerated again. The two water dragons' bodies seemed to be dancing in the sky now, their wings flapping at a quick speed to try and hunt or flee the other. They didn't hesitate to dash through the thick, humid clouds, or fly low to the capital's rocks. It was a terrifying game of hunt, or even hide and seek. Every time Jin tried to find a place to hide, to cover itself, Cease would inevitably appear, with those ruby eyes glowing in anger. The silver dragon was now mimicking its mistress' wrath, and just wouldn't stop until it got its prey. The two of them flew in between the bridges, and even dived into the sea. Perhaps Jin had hoped to swim faster than Cease, but it turned out to be another mistake. In fact, with its wings closed and its body slithering quickly, Cecilia's dragon was even faster as a swimmer. The raging waves were no problem, and the dragons brutally clashed for the first time underwater. The impact was violent. Cecilia had just enough time to take a deep breath in, and when her dragon suddenly attacked Jin, she almost breathed it out from the sudden impact. A thick trail of blood appeared in the water. Cease was like a snake, trying to use that long silver body to corner Jin and find the first opportunity to violently bite. The red dragon growled furiously and fought back, unwilling to admit defeat. The violent exchange ensued for several seconds, but soon, Jin somehow managed to get away, and Cease swam back to the surface so Cecilia could breathe. When they breached the surface, the princess took a deep breath in, grateful. Holding her breath so long underwater sure was different when she had to hold on to a rowdy dragon at the same time. She pushed her hair back, suddenly remembering it was half cut. "Let's go up," she said. Cease immediately obeyed and flew up again, away from the waves. Jin wasn't in sight anymore, but the duo couldn't have gone far. All their surroundings were in view, and Cecilia suspected they had found a temporary hideout. Pulling on her dragon to direct its movements, she got Cease to fly above the rest of the capital. She looked for her allies at the same time as they searched for Jin. She spotted the two distinct battlefields and, a bit more worrying, the numerous fires that were spreading across the capital. Ashen's home was bleeding out. Luckily, it looked like the situation was tilting to their side. Downtown, a large but ravaged battlefield was clearly more dominated by the locals than the Yekara colors. Cecilia even recognized her brothers, and Tessandra, all three of them absorbed in their fighting, but still raising their heads when they saw her or heard Cease. She was too high to see their expressions, but she was glad they all seemed fine. Moreover, her dragon was still focused on its prey, and barely glanced down toward the humans fighting below. With another impatient and irritated growl, Cease did a new loop around the capital. Feeling her dragon's impatience, Cecilia was looking all around too. It was quite nerve-wracking. The difference in size between the two dragons was huge, but if Jin found a way to hide, this hunt could potentially last a while, and that was the opposite of what Cecilia wanted. She wanted to end this fight soon and return to Ashen's side to check on him. That whole battle against Giselle had lasted too long already. Suddenly, a furious growl came from behind and above them. Cecilia felt the sudden wind blowing from behind, and turned around just in time to see Jin jumping on them, all claws out. Cease didn't have time to turn around, but Cecilia did. Without hesitation, she grabbed her smaller blade and plunged it into the red dragon's incoming paw, impaling it to the hilt. Jin let out a furious growl of pain, but not without managing to scratch Cease with its other paw. However, the silver dragon wouldn't have it. Furious, Cease turned around and violently bit back, its fangs crushing Jin's front paw in one bite. "My dragon!" shouted Giselle, furious. "If you're sorry for him, come and fight yourself," retorted Cecilia. She pulled back the blade, the only weapon she had left, and violently kicked the red dragon's snout before it could even think of trying to bite her. Jin growled and tried to retreat, but Cease wouldn't let go of its limb. Dragon blood suddenly rained down as the two intertwined dragons battled one another furiously, one trying to get away, the other refusing to let go. It had become a chaotic mess of scales and blood flying, ferocious growls and dragon screams. Cecilia tried to run down the dragon's back to get to Giselle, but every time she moved, the two dragons changed positions again, making her lose her balance. She could only hold on to Cease every time, or risk being thrown off. Giselle, on the other hand, had barely moved, if not to retreat away from Ceci's fangs now digging into her poor dragon's shoulder. By now, it had bitten down on more than enough of the red dragon's flesh, and they could hear the sounds of bones being crushed under the pressure. Cecilia couldn't help but feel a bit sorry for Jin's suffering. "Cease!" she shouted. Her dragon grunted, and brutally ripped off that foreleg. Cease spat it out while the injured Jin was retreating, completely terrified, its limbless shoulder pouring thick dragon blood into the river. Cease let out another long scream, and flew back to face Jin, showing off its still blood-stained fangs. "Get down from that dragon, Giselle," Cecilia said, "or I'll have to kill him too." Giselle's horrified eyes were on the dragon's injury. If she felt sorry for Jin, she also looked more worried for herself, and how her dragon looked like it wouldn't be able to defend her for much longer. "You wish," she screamed. This dragon is mine. He's mine and he will defend me even if he has to die doing it. That's the only thing he's worthy of. That's the only reason I kept him." Cecilia glared at her. She could see Gisel's survival instincts building up in a horrible manner. That was the look of a woman absolutely terrified by the mere idea of her death. She wouldn't give up, ever. The only way of life she knew was to survive, at absolutely any cost. She would lie, run, hide, cheat all she could rather than give up or die. Even if she had to sacrifice a loyal dragon in the process. Cecilia took a deep breath, and slowly, put her open palm against Cecil's cold body. She could feel all of her dragon's emotions like her own. Impatience, frustration, stubbornness, resolve. The rage built up from the adrenaline of the fight. Anger, and that strong desire to protect Cecilia too. The disgust of the taste of dragon blood. Cease was sick of this fight too. "We need to separate those two," muttered Cecilia. Her dragon growled in agreement. Cease was mad at that brat that refused to submit and kept running away. Dragons weren't meant to run away or avoid fights. If it knew it were the weaker one, it should have simply conceded defeat, and this would have all been over. This whole chasing and hunting of a peer was annoying, frustrating. Moreover, the dragon and its mistress' anger were directed at the same person, that mad woman on the red dragon's back. Cease was mirroring Cecilia's anger toward her, and her conflicted feelings toward the unfortunate red dragon. The pair understood each other perfectly with just a few words and a touch. Gisel then proceeded to have Jin turn around and fly away again. Of course, the red dragon was trying to get as far away from Cease as possible and delay its inevitable demise. Cease didn't start the chase right away, but instead let out another long scream, and took some height above the fleeing red dragon. Jin was considerably slowed down by the terrible injury. Its flying didn't look as precise as before, almost as if it was on the verge of collapse. It was flying lower and lower and, at the right moment, Cease dove. The silver dragon came down from the sky like another lightning bolt, and the hit was just as brutal. Cecilia had to stick to her dragon's back for the impact, and even like this, she was brutally ejected. Luckily, her body landed on the sand, right below them. Irony had it that they were back on the beach where she and her brothers had let Gisel live once before. The tide had already washed away all traces of the previous fight, and the sand was wet under their feet. Cecilia felt the waves caress her ankles as she quickly jumped back on her feet. She heard the screams of two dragons fighting, and the waves of sand violently thrown in all directions. The fight was incredibly brutal, with their bodies rolling in the sand, silver and red scales mixed at such a speed, she could barely see who was on top. From her dragon's angry growls, Cecilia could tell hers was mad and frustrated, but not in pain. Jin was desperately trying to survive the attacks, and Cease was trying not to kill. It was absolute chaos, but in the midst of this, there was no way Gisel was still on her dragon's back. Cecilia looked around and spotted her on all fours in the sand, yards away from her, almost on the other end of the beach. She must have been hurt from the fall, seeing how that woman struggled to get back up. As soon as her eyes met Cecilia's, though, she found the strength to stand up again and run. This time, she couldn't fly away, and she was cornered on the beach. Only the distance and the two dragons fighting between them kept Cecilia away from her. Ah! Cecilia heard her laugh. "You're too weak, princess. Too weak to kill another dragon, aren't you? Look! Jin will fight for me to the end, and you'll let him kill your dragon because you're so weak." "No," Cecilia muttered. "Not again." She turned her green gaze to the two dragons. As if they had heard the two women, the two of them separated, still furiously growling at each other, but putting a bit of a distance between one another. Even if they didn't finish, Cease was the clear winner. The silver dragon only had a few bite marks bleeding on random spots of its body, and a slight limp in its rear paw, but that was it. Jin, on the other end, was in a pitiful state. On top of its ripped-off limb, the red dragon was also now missing a large portion of its left wing and eye, and had deep lacerations all over. The red of its blood was transforming its scales into a darker red shade, and staining the sand beneath. Upon seeing Cease retreat, it kept growling, slowly retreating toward Giselle with a defensive stance. Meanwhile, Cecil's silver body curled up around Cecilia, still letting out furious warning growls right back at Jin. However, the silver water dragon was obediently standing behind its mistress, leaving her the space to walk up closer to Jin. The red dragon didn't seem much more enthusiastic to face the woman. It kept retreating, looking like it didn't know which one of the pair to growl at. Cecilia kept marching toward the dragon, a bit exhausted by all the fighting, her arms sore from hanging on to Cease so tightly, but incredibly calm and composed. In fact, her glowing green eyes were somewhat scaring Jin more than her dragon counterpart. The closer she came, the more the red dragon felt the need to retreat and growl. It was obvious its goal was still to protect Giselle somehow, but fear was dominating in its eyes. "That woman doesn't deserve to have a dragon," Cecilia muttered, addressing the dragon itself. "You don't decide that," shouted Giselle. "This dragon only survived thanks to me. I'm the reason Jin is alive, and he has to protect me, like my brother should have. He'll die for me if he has to." "No," Cecilia muttered. She walked even closer, and this time, Jin's growling turned more serious, the dragon taking a step toward her, getting ready to fight her again if needed. Behind Cecilia, Cease kept growling in warning too, but the silver dragon didn't move to defend its mistress. Cecilia suddenly got within range, and Jin attacked. The red dragon jumped on her, its claws missing her by a bit as she jumped to the side. With one of its legs missing, its landing completely failed, and it rolled on its injured shoulder, making the dragon scream in pain. No dragon should have to die for its owner. Suddenly, Cecilia stood back up, and took a deep breath in. Jin tried to jump back on its feet, fangs out and ready to bite, but before it did, Cecilia suddenly blew out a gigantic blast of snow and ice. The red dragon was violently swept back, its body hitting the external wall of the cave, and it stopped there, lying on the ground. Cecilia slowly turned to a speechless Giselle and, in an attempt to protect its owner once more, Jin pitifully tried to stand up. That's when Cease jumped in, and just like Cecilia, suddenly blew an impressive amount of snow and ice on the red dragon. Except, it was much bigger and more powerful, and soon, most of Jin's body was trapped in large blocks of ice. Meanwhile, Cecilia took out her dagger and calmly approached Giselle, who was still stunned, her eyes on her dragon. She shook her head frantically, and fell back, not even trying to run. "That can't be," she muttered, sobbing. "That's not a water dragon. It can't be, an ice dragon." Gisel's expression changed to one of pure fear. Whatever was going on, she couldn't accept it. She wasn't ready for that. Her eyes went back to Cecilia, suddenly switching to anger. "He'll betray you too," she hissed. "You can't trust men. They will always find a younger, prettier woman to chase instead of you. Just you wait. He'll throw you away." "I'm not scared of Ashen changing his mind," Cecilia retorted calmly. "Even if he betrays me, I'll take it, and move on. You're the one who thinks we can't advance without a man in this world. But you're wrong. I've learned my lesson already. With or without a man by my side, I'll be fine." You wench!" shouted Giselle, still backing away, half crying now. "You took it all from me. You're the one who doesn't know how to let go. You didn't even love Ashen, yet you held on desperately. You could have stayed out of this conflict, but you chose to ally with the Yekara, Giselle. I thought you were a smart woman, but the truth is, you're the real coward here." "Am I?" she scoffed. Her eyes went down on the dagger Cecilia was holding. She was still hesitating, just a bit. She wasn't afraid to kill anymore, but Giselle. Somehow, she was reluctant to kill her. Not because of her relationship with Ashen, or because of their history. No, Cecilia had a feeling that, in other circumstances, with another path in life, that woman would have turned out very differently. In some way, Giselle was just another victim who had turned to the worst means to survive. They even had blood in common. She was a dragon's daughter too. Something in Cecilia's heart held her hand, wondering if there was really nothing that could be done. Of course, Giselle had already gone too far to redeem herself, and she knew it was too late for that woman to change, or was it? To her surprise, Giselle slowly stood up. She didn't have any weapons anymore, and no will to fight left. Cecilia didn't feel any danger coming from that woman. She had given up, yet a mocking smirk was on her lips. "Are you really stronger than I am, princess?" she said, strangely calmly. "If your precious king betrays you, do you really think you can ever take it?" "I can take it," Cecilia retorted without blinking. Giselle smiled, and stepped closer to her. "There have been so many like me," she muttered. "Desperate women, willing to do anything to survive. Women with no dragons to help them." She finally got very close to Cecilia, and touched her hand that was holding the dagger, strangely gentle. Cecilia held her weapon tighter, just in case Giselle would try to take it, or turn it against her, but it didn't feel that way. "If you want to help them, you should be ready to do this." She suddenly pulled her fist, and brutally impaled herself on the dagger. Shocked, Cecilia stared at Giselle's eyes, and the strange smile that appeared on her lips. The two women exchanged a stare for a long minute, and then, Giselle coughed some blood, and slowly fell back, her body dropping on the sand. Her eyes half closed, she had stopped moving, lying completely still and her head turned toward the crying red dragon. Cecilia was shocked. She stared at Giselle's breathless figure, unable to comprehend why that woman had done that. She had been so desperate to survive just a moment ago. Had she realized she had lost the moment her dragon was trapped? Or had she already been badly injured during the fall? That would explain how her death had been so quick, or perhaps she had purposely stabbed herself so she'd die quickly. Cecilia would maybe never understand why she had suddenly chosen this end, or get answers to her questions. Either way, that woman was dead. Cecilia dropped her dagger, a bit out of breath. She felt strange. The body of the dead woman lying in front of her didn't feel real. She didn't know what she should have expected, but strangely, she didn't really feel anything. Just tired, maybe. The waves gently came up to their position, reaching Giselle's body. If she left her like that, her body would be swept away soon. She would disappear in the sea, like many, perhaps. She could hear the long cries of the red dragon. Jin's faint squeals were heartbreaking to hear. Cecilia let out a faint sigh, a cold mist coming out of her lips. One fight she had finally ended. It didn't feel like a victory, but it sure felt like closure. A faint, more gentle growl came from behind her. Cecilia smiled, and turned to face Cease. The majestic silver dragon was standing there, with those big ruby eyes staring right at her. They faced each other on the beach, finally getting a moment to themselves. The thunder had stopped too. Now, all they could hear was the calm sea, the rain, and the cries of a mourning dragon. Cecilia slowly approached her dragon. Cease was so big now, she had to stand up to be at the same height as her dragon's eyes. Gently, she put her hands around her dragon's face, around what would be its cheeks. She smiled, and gently put her forehead against her cold scales. Cease released a little breath of cold mist too. Strangely, her dragon's coolness warmed Cecilia's heart, and brought her peace. "Did you come back because you were worried about me?" she muttered. Cease growled faintly. "Thank you, for giving me a second chance." She stayed for a long moment like this, taking deep breaths with her. The cold, almost eerie white mist around her dragon was making her feel safe, and calmed her down. She could feel her lungs fill with fresh air as some heavy burden was lifted off her shoulders. With Cease there, she felt incredibly strong, serene, and complete. Just like her dragon, she was different from the young woman Cease had parted with, years ago. The two of them were more mature, stronger, fiercer, and more united than ever. The two of them stood still for just a few minutes, as a quiet reunion. After a while, Cecilia stepped back, her hands still on her dragon's cheeks. "I think we have to go now. Sorry for bringing you back into such a mess." Cease released a little, spat out a mouthful of snow, and nudged Cecilia's face with her snout, making her smile. "You're right. Let's go." The two of them turned heads toward Jin, who was still trying to fight the ice it was trapped in. Sadly for the red dragon, Ceci's thick ice wasn't going to melt anytime soon. It tried to move again, but Cease suddenly growled as a warning, making Jin whimper and calm down. "We'll take care of him later," said Cecilia. "Let's go help the others now." Cease turned around, and Cecilia quickly climbed on her dragon's back. When they took off, Cecilia couldn't help but glance one last time at the beach, Giselle's body still lying there and getting smaller as Cease flew up. She sighed, and then turned her eyes forward. Her dragon knew exactly where to head first. Flying through the rain, Cease took her back to the capital's streets, flying above the main place of conflict. Just like Cray or Kian, Cease was too big for the narrow alleys of the island, so Cecilia jumped down, landing on a roof and sliding down until she hit the street. She had been dropped just streets away from the main battle, but the number of fires going on in the area was worrying her. The alleys were filled with dark smoke, ashes, and people fleeing. Some recognized her, and tried to run to her to beg for help, but Cecilia knew she had to keep going. Apologizing when she could, she kept running, trying to find her cousin's figure she had spotted from above. Tessa! Ceci! As soon as she heard her, her cousin stopped her fight and turned around, and the two of them ran to each other. The two women jumped into each other's arms, relieved. "You're good," exclaimed Tessandra. "I was starting to get real worried. Is that Cease up there?" "It is," smiled Cecilia. "She's back." "She's back and with a massive upgrade, you mean? What the heck did she eat to get that big? And is it just me or has she changed color too?" "Just a bit," Cecilia chuckled. "What about, up there?" muttered Tessandra, glancing toward the castle. "I got it. I just wanted to check on you guys here first. If it wasn't for those fires, it would be better. We've pretty much won the fight already, but putting out those fires is a bit more complicated than just kicking someone. Don't worry, though, we got this. You go get your man, all right?" "I will. But first..." Cecilia glanced up at the sky, at her dragon, and Cease loudly screamed back. Then, the silver dragon did a beautiful arc in the sky, and dived down on the capital. Right before it hit the building, it suddenly flapped its gigantic wings, and blew a long wave of ice and snow above the whole area. Everyone stopped, speechless, to witness the incredible white specks raining down on them. Not only had Cease blown an ice mist over the building, but the rain itself was cooled down, and came down in little snow crystals above the streets. Thanks to that, the fires were all almost immediately blown out and dampened, leaving smoke plumes everywhere. Tessandra's jaw dropped. What in the world was that? You got a snow dragon now? An ice dragon? Ah, scoffed Tessandra. Too cool to play the water dragon now, Well, I'm glad our girl is back, and you too. Cecilia smiled, and they hugged once more, quickly but strongly. Tessandra had noticed not only how her cousin wasn't stuttering anymore, but also how she was different. When they let go of each other, she put a hand on her hip, glancing around. "Well, thanks for the help with the fires, I think we'll manage things from here. You better go and save whatever's left of your man. Will you be all right?" "Ceci, I've been having fun slicing guys in two for the last hour or so, shouting after your annoying brother, and spending time with my boyfriend too. Trust me, we're good here." Even Nana's turning into somewhat of a pyromaniac. "Nana?" frowned Cecilia, confused. "Long story, but the family might get bigger quite soon. Anyways, I'll update you later. Don't worry about us, go." Cecilia nodded and, After one last glance, she turned around, headed for the highest roof she could find in the area. It did seem like Tessandra and her brothers had a hold of the situation already. For some reason, it looked like they had gathered the Yekara soldiers and mercenaries in the middle of the plaza, and were subjugating the last ones resisting, or hunting them down in the streets. Quickly reaching the rooftop, Cecilia jumped just in time to be grabbed by silver-scaled claws. Holding on to her dragon, she quickly climbed all the way to Cecil's back and sat to take a better look at the situation below. The streets were still very animated with people either fighting, fleeing, or helping to put out the remaining fires. It seemed like the last fights were now pretty scattered, and would die soon. As Cease flew higher, Cecilia saw beyond the inner and outer walls. For some reason, one of the bridges was gone, but Kian and Cray were still fiercely defending two of the three remaining, and the last one was visibly under the citizens' control. In fact, she could see people going in and out, probably exchanging supplies or carrying the injured to safer locations. She could bet the camp they had set up before was helping again, and she spotted what she thought to be food distribution lines too. Someone had perhaps reused their ideas for the greater good. As they got closer to the castle, Cecilia saw the plaza where they had freed Sabale and the others. To her surprise, she spotted Cashin almost there, leading more men and regaining control of the area too. Her brother looked busy, but he still glanced up, and smiled at her when their eyes met. Cecilia smiled right back at him, a bit relieved to have him help out too. How much more complicated would the situation have been, had her big brothers not shown up? Still, the final battle was up to Ashen and her. Cease flew in circles around the castle. The tower Cecilia had fought Jin in previously with the banquet hall was completely gone and reduced to a mountain of bricks. In fact, a fifth of the castle had collapsed and been destroyed as a result. Cecilia sighed, but luckily, it was most likely Yekarim men who would have been killed in that disaster. Meanwhile, Cease kept flying, trying to find a point to drop Cecilia at. She didn't want to have to go back all the way from the bottom to the top, but her dragon quickly found the perfect spot. Ironically, it was the Cerulean Suite's balcony. Cecilia jumped into the familiar place, now looking all dark and gloomy. She loved this room a lot, and was glad it had somehow survived the castle's collapse. She turned around to face Cease. "Don't worry, I'll be fine." Her dragon screeched in response, and left, probably off to extinguish more fires and help wherever it would be needed. Cecilia turned around, resolute, and began running. The castle had never felt so empty and cold. She only stopped to grab some new weapons, having lost her dragon claw swords in the fight against Jin. She didn't expect any more dragon enemies, though, and a set of short swords taken from a Yekara soldier would be enough to face whoever was left. Now that her bond with Cease was re-established, Cecilia was even more unstoppable. She effortlessly fended off the few soldiers that dared to stand in her way up the tower. The only thing she was worried about was Ashen. How long had passed since they had split up? She was desperate to know if he was all right. She had left him alone against his adopted brother and Lord Yebek. If anything had happened to him. As she kept climbing up, her worry grew exponentially for him. Gisel's words came back in her head. Would she really be fine without him? And what would happen to this kingdom if anything happened to Ashen? The questions hammered her heart like a restless monster trying to bring her down. Still, Cecilia kept climbing. She couldn't even feel the injuries of her previous fight against Jin anymore. Her dragon blood was healing it all, as if getting ready for the next one. Her body was still covered in scales, but that wouldn't be a problem if everything inside was healed just as well. She finally reached the throne room and barged inside, opening the doors wide. She was shocked to find the room covered in blood. A real carnage had happened there. Cecilia suddenly remembered she and Ashen had also fought more soldiers before splitting up. Still, there was even more blood now, and fresher too. How could the two of them have carried out such a fight? There was even blood high up on the walls. Her green eyes moved, and she saw, right in time, the silver flash of a sword. Cecilia jumped without even needing to fight, blocking the blade right above Ashen. Lord Yebeka's eyes grew wide in shock. "You," he grunted. "Me?" Cecilia kicked him in the torso, her incredible strength sending the man flying against the opposite wall. She heard him grunt in pain, but she was already leaning down to check on Ashen. "Ashen, are you all right?" "Yeah, not doing exactly great." His slow, hoarse voice said more than his actual words about his current state. Cecilia's eyes went down on his body. He was alive, but badly injured. The large red stain on his abdomen was most worrisome. He was lying down, covered in blood and exhausted, but she had high hopes he could still survive if he was given the proper care soon. Cecilia glanced back. His adopted brother's body was lying not too far from his. Unlike Ashen, that man was dead, for good. "Please tell me we're not doing this again," grunted Ashen. Cecilia shook her head. "No. He's gone for good." "I see." Ashen didn't seem glad about his win, just relieved it was over. He had fought well, and the fight had probably been more violent than what she could see. From the injuries on both men, Cecilia could tell they had fought like dragons despite each having their own disadvantage. "You wench!" Cecilia glared over her shoulder. Yebek was getting back on his feet, furious. He had probably expected an easy win after leaving Ashen to fight his own brother. From the way he was completely unharmed, she could guess this rotten man had likely just watched the fight, waiting for a winner to emerge to strike. "I'm fed up with that," groaned Ashen, glaring at him too. "Don't worry, stay still," gently muttered Cecilia. He frowned, probably confused by her lack of stutter, but Cecilia smiled, and put a quick kiss on his lips. "I got this," she reassured him. Leaving Ashen there, she then slowly stood up to face Yebek in his stead. "Ah," scoffed the man. "What kind of king lets a woman fight in his stead? What kind of leaves a disabled man to fight in his?" Cecilia retorted. Yebeka's expression dropped. That woman looked completely different from before. She sounded different, colder, angrier. He hadn't expected this. No, he hadn't expected her to come back at all. He had seen that tower collapse. "It doesn't change a thing," he hissed. "This kingdom is mine. I won't be stopped by a mere girl. We'll see about that. I'll admit I underestimated you, war god's daughter," said Yebek. "I shouldn't have expected that she'd be able to take care of you." Cecilia frowned slightly. What did you promise Giselle? Oh, whatever that wench begged for. Either way, she knew this kingdom would be mine. Once she knew our king was throwing her back onto the streets, she was only too happy to beg, like the whore she is. Cecilia's fingers tightened on her weapon, Ashen's sword she had taken from his side. She may not have liked Giselle, but she hated that man 10 times more. He was one of those truly terrible people whose wickedness could literally be read on their face. He didn't feel an ounce of remorse for what he had done, or all the lives his cupidity had sacrificed. He hadn't even wasted a drop of sweat while dozens of his men were dying outside. Cecilia glanced back at Ashen. Even lying on the ground and injured, he still had the strength to glare at Yebek. He probably couldn't move, and it was better he didn't. Not only because of his wound bleeding heavily, but also because he was under the effects of a poison, and moving around would only make it harder for his body to fight it. She had high hopes Ashen's body would manage to fight it off somehow, as he had some tolerance to poison. From what she had seen, he was enduring well. Still, Cecilia wanted to get him out of here as fast as possible. The sooner he received proper medical care, the greater his chances would be to survive this and fully heal. Are you worried for your king? Scoffed Yebek. That boy never had what it truly takes to be a ruler. He's too young, too impetuous, too easily swayed by his emotions. And you believe yourself to be any better? Cecilia calmly retorted. Of course. See, it takes experience, strength, and some willpower to lead a nation. You're a young lady, so you may not know, but while the population only bows to power, they have no idea of the real sacrifices that need to be made for a proper leader to truly rule. You've sacrificed a lot of people, and yet you'll never be king. Her words made the man glare back, but Cecilia was still perfectly calm. Despite the age difference and that man's arrogant tone, it seemed as if she was the one lecturing him. The two of them were facing each other, a few steps away from one another, too far to begin fighting, but certainly getting ready for it. Cecilia wouldn't move away from her position defending Ashen, but Yebek had begun moving around, slowly pacing while spinning the tip of his sword against his finger, staring at her with a vicious expression. I have waited for far too long, he retorted. I've let boys play with swords and pathetic men wield power, waiting for my time to come. You're nothing but a cunning snake, Cecilia muttered. You've only used people to fulfill your means, but your underhanded ways will never make you a king. Ha! And you think that Brad is a better king, perhaps? He knows nothing. He still makes a much better king than you, she retorted without batting an eye. Ashen is closer to the people than you'll ever be. What kind of leader stays hidden in a tower while the rest of his men fight and bleed? What kind of man sacrifices his own niece for power? You don't deserve to become king, Lord Yebek. Your clan might follow your orders, but the rest of this kingdom never will. A child like you knows nothing. True power is leading your men to victory. The best leaders are the ones who do not need to fight the war themselves to win. The survivors are the smartest, not the strongest. All I need is to claim the heirs have died, and I am the most fitting king for this kingdom. I have the men, the resources, and the money. I have an army that will follow me, and those we can't get on our side, we will kill. The people of this kingdom are powerless. They have no money and no power to resist the Yekara clan. My ancestors knew long ago that this land would come back to us one day. My clan is one of the oldest here, princess, and we have waited for centuries to get it back. Blind is the man who thinks reigning is all about owning a piece of land, chuckled Cecilia. Your leadership means absolutely nothing to the people of this kingdom, Yebek. They do not care for your schemes and underhanded ways. If anything, you're probably the very last man they'd want to see on the throne. The man glared at the abandoned throne behind him. Ashen's adopted brother's body was still there, just steps away from the meaningful seat, and Yebeka's eyes naturally went to it. He scoffed. Ha! You think either of those brats would have made a better king? They know nothing about politics. They couldn't even get their way with their father. At least the general was a man who knew how to rule. He killed his enemies, and kept his allies where he could get rid of them if they weren't useful. Compared to him, those brats are just powerless boys, only capable of sitting there and listening to what we tell them. He suddenly pointed at Ashen, and Cecilia raised her sword in a defensive stance. Why do you think I didn't get rid of this boy sooner? I had plenty of opportunities. But while he was alive, he made a perfect puppet for us to use. Each lord is more pathetic than the next, worthless, useless, and I knew he would follow what I told him, helpless as he was. Everything should have gone just fine. All I needed was to give him my daughter as a wife, and I would have controlled his heirs as I wanted. There is no need for a throne or a crown, I have always been the real king of this kingdom. Unlike the tyrant, I didn't need people to know my name. All I needed was the power that came with those responsibilities. I would have kept this kingdom powerful, and safe from your dragon empire. What of the cities outside the capital? Asked Cecilia. All those people dying of hunger? All the homeless, penniless people who can't live in the capital? There is no need to bother with the vermin, scoffed Yebek. It takes care of itself eventually. It will probably take decades before those wretched people figure it out, anyway. All we need in the capital is for the money to flourish, our clan to prosper. So you're really just in it for the money and power, sighed Cecilia. I was right. Even in a million years, you'll never be worthy of the king's position. You're just a pampered child coming from an all-powerful family, he shouted. You know nothing of real power. Only the Yekara clan has what it takes to stand up to the Dragon Empire. You think things are so easy because your family has dragons to keep your people in check. Here, all we have are weapons and money. You seem to forget one thing, Yebek, Cecilia retorted, finally stepping forward. The Dragon Empire's leader is a woman, and she has no dragon either. The only adult dragon in the capital is my grandfather's, and he is too old to bother. Moreover, our people do not fear our dragons anymore. My siblings and I have been playing in the streets with our dragons along with any commoner child. If anything, our people adore our dragons because they defend them. They don't fear them. You think only fear can allow one to rule? You're wrong. No, you're crazy. You're the one who has no idea what makes this kingdom's people feel safe or happy. How dare you, he shouted, furious. This isn't your kingdom. You know nothing. I've seen and heard enough, Cecilia retorted. The man took a step back, taken by surprise. This didn't even feel like he was facing the same woman from earlier. Her appearance had changed a lot. He could understand the ripped clothes, the dried blood, and the silver scales on her, but what was making him retreat was her demeanor. She didn't act like the shy princess from before. He had thought this woman would be easy to handle compared to the king, so how was she now facing him, acting tall, mighty, and as powerful as a queen? Cecilia had always been tall, but only now did she seem to look her full height, almost looking down on that pathetic man, and standing like a lioness between him and the king. No, she looked like a fierce dragon facing him, ready to spit her fire at a weak human. She was still clearly a human, so how were her green eyes so scary? He took a deep breath and held his sword with two hands, getting ready for her to attack any second now. He could tell she was strong, and not as tired as he would have hoped for her to be. He had been able to stand on the sidelines while the king fought his adopted brother, but now, she was not going to let him get away so easily. She wasn't just blocking him from approaching the king, she was also standing in front of the large doors, making any attempt to flee impossible. He thought he'd be the one to lead the fight, so how was he feeling cornered already? Real leaders are military, strategic leaders, he resumed, with a low voice. Those young men are nothing but empty symbols for the people. Ashen resonates with his people more than you'll ever be able to understand. He's only a prince for show. That brat knows nothing. He knows what his people's lives are like. Cecilia suddenly shouted back. She stepped forward again, making the man even more nervous. He's a man of the people, and you're just a rat making a feast out of scraps, she continued with an ice-cold glare. You think you manipulate anything? You're just finding yourself excuses to remain the vulture hiding in the shadows. Ashen is the real king, and he will be for as long as he's alive. Even if something happened to him, those people would never accept you as their leader. Look outside, Yebek. You've already lost. The people aren't the cowards you think. They'll fight with all their might for their freedom, and since you have no idea what those people truly want, you and your men will inevitably lose. Cecilia's sword was on him in a split second. Yebek had to show his skills quickly to be able to block it at the very last second, and endure the tremendous strength of the dragon princess. He grimaced, holding his sword against hers. Their faces were so close she could see the pearls of sweat appearing on his forehead, and his teeth gritting from the effort. Cecilia was fed up with this man, and had no intention to give him any chance. She was sick of his underhanded ways, and ready to end him here and now. She suddenly released the pressure and spun around, launching a second assault with impressive speed. In just a few clashes of swords, she was able to confirm Yebeka's skills and experience weren't fake or overestimated. He truly had the right movements and reflexes of a man who had fought in a military camp most of his life. Her terrific strength was met with his best tactics to try and block her, again and again, as she intensified her attacks. Cecilia had to admit, the old snake was a decent fighter. In her father's army, he would have been amongst the best-ranked generals, capable of military strategy as well as fighting himself. When they finally parted, her giving him a break, the man was out of breath but unscathed. Cecilia slowly spun her weapon in her hand, and retreated to get to Ashen, quickly checking on him. He had closed his eyes, but he was still slowly and steadily breathing. She slowly moved her wrists to stretch them a bit. His sword was larger than what she's used to and not the type she would have chosen, but she had to make do with it. If only you hadn't interfered, hissed Yebek. I had this stupid boy in the palm of my hand. I've already heard that today, groaned Cecilia, and I pity you for not being able to realize how much of a good king you already had. If I hadn't interfered, you would have fallen all the same. It's your loss for underestimating how strong this kingdom really is. Strong? You're the mistaken one, child. Those people are living with nothing. This kingdom is destined for ruin if no strong man takes the reins. To his surprise and anger, Cecilia chuckled. Do you know what those people really need, Yebek? Money, he shouted. Power, and the means to fish beignet. Cecilia's words surprised him so much, the man's expression fell, and he blinked twice, wondering if he hadn't dreamed this stupidly simple couple of words. He scoffed. What did you say? Fish beignet, Cecilia retorted, with a smile on her lips. Have you gone mad? I'm very serious, she said. You've probably never had any, but what all those people outside need are tasty, warm fish beignet. The taste of delicious food in the morning, warming up their hearts and filling their stomachs. You see, men like you are the type to consider the Duro-safe people as ignorant and harmless. When, in reality, they are exactly what the kingdom needs. Nothing but kindness, and the will to make other people's lives better. They do not care who eats the beignet they prepare every morning. They are just happy to serve. You're ridiculous, grunted Yebek. There's no way stupid beignet, it's not just stupid beignet. It's the best food I've ever tasted, chuckled Cecilia. The fish is fresh, the dough is warm, and it just melts on your tongue and fills up your stomach. In fact, it's probably worth much more than they make people pay for it too, but the Duro-safe don't care for money. All they want is to have others taste their food, and they always serve it with a smile. The Duro-safe people are nothing like men like you, but they are the real owners of this kingdom. They live every day with little to no expectations, only happy to fish, cook, and eat. As she said this, Cecilia had naturally walked up to one of the windows, glancing outside. Ironically, from this tower, she could see the seashore and the harbor where the Duro-safe ships were swaying on the sea. Despite the rain, it seemed much calmer and more peaceful than the burning city she had seen outside. This kingdom's people have no need for a man like you, absolutely none, Yebek. This kingdom won't heal with more military power or political schemes. It will heal if we, the people, get along and help one another, if they understand each other, and open their doors, and their hearts. You think your Yekara clan is better than the others, but you're the very last clan this population cares about, believe me. The warm herbal tea the Hashit makes is worth thousands of your swords. They will heal the kingdom when it's needed, and study until its medical knowledge is on par with the dragon empires. The Sesson tribe's beautiful creations will bring back color and hope in their lives. They can trade with the empire, and bring even more wealth, even more beauty back to the Eastern Kingdom. They don't think about reinforcing borders, they think about what could be gained by opening them. Even the Cheshi are ready to ally with the people, stepping out of centuries-old secret hiding places to protect others. Enough! Yebek shouted. Those useless tribes' trinkets and stupid tea are meaningless. This kingdom needs to get stronger. You can't become stronger if you don't heal first, Cecilia retorted. If I have learned one lesson since coming here, it is that a kingdom needs time, patience, kindness, and faith to heal, just like people. Those people aren't just cattle who'll all depend on you. Each and every person out there is already doing their best and not waiting for their king to save them. They don't need a strong king, they need one that can understand them, get on their level, and give them time. Your greedy and brutal ways will only provoke more struggle and death. Look outside. You've already filled this capital with blood and fire for power. What will happen to the whole kingdom if a man like you ever holds more power? She took a deep breath, and returned to her original position, glaring at him. I won't allow it, she said. I'll put an end to your ambitions, and help Ashen get it back on its feet. You can't stop us, he groaned. Even if you kill me, another commander is ready to take over any minute. The Yekura clan is stronger than you think. Good, said Cecilia. I don't care how long it'll take, but we'll make sure to end this. My brothers would call it boring if you made it too easy for us. Plus, I plan to stay here for a while. What gives you the right to interfere? He shouted, raising his sword and getting ready to defend himself again. You're just a child who came here on a whim. Cecilia chuckled, and raised her sword. Didn't you hear your king before, Lord Yebek? I'm his queen. I didn't come here on a whim, I came here to heal. Now I'm ready to give back what this country gave me. Moreover, when the king needs her, it's the queen's duty to step up and get rid of the vermin. Get in position, Yebek. This girl is about to show you what a real fighter can do. The loud growl of a furious silver dragon echoed with her words. Your Lord Yebek never found anything to insult her with, and Cecilia didn't leave him the time to, either. She decided to resume this fight, more determined than ever. Her sword swung in his direction, and he only had enough time to raise his. Their swords clashed again, faster than before. They clearly had opposing objectives. Cecilia wanted to end this fight soon, while Yebek wanted to make it last. It probably had to do with Ashen's condition. That man thought that if he could make this last long enough, the king would die. Cecilia had no intention to let him win. She was getting tired, and this was the last fight she couldn't wait to be done with. She was already very different from the woman she was when she first arrived. Even since that morning, she felt like she had shed her old skin and been reborn into a stronger being, fiercer than ever. This time, she could proudly stand as the war god's daughter and Ashen's future queen. She was pushing Yebek more and more, not withholding her attacks, relentlessly pursuing the man. As he was trying to get away from her and her weapon, the man kept her circling around the room. The only thing Cecilia was adamant about was not letting this man anywhere near Ashen. She was protecting him, standing in the way as much as she could while trying to finish Yebek off. It wasn't as easy as she had hoped. The man was truly skilled and experienced. Unlike most men, he knew not to rely on his strength alone, and was improving minute by minute, learning Cecilia's style as much as she was learning his. It was no easy fight. My lord! The voices coming from behind her made Cecilia lose her focus. She glanced back, annoyed to see more Yekarus soldiers had made it all the way up to this room. She could already barely hold Yebek at a distance. "Ah!" shouted Yebek. "See, a brat like you is no leader. You can't do anything if you're alone." Cecilia's green eyes suddenly went back to him, glowing with anger. "Who said I was alone?" A furious dragon growl resonated above their heads. It was louder than the thunder, like a deafening echo in the skies above, surrounding the tower. Glimpses of flying silver scales flew by the windows like lightning bolts in the darkness. A smile appeared on Cecilia's lips. The Yekarim men were already staring toward the ceiling, looking afraid and unsure of what to expect. They probably hadn't seen the giant silver dragon yet, and now they were in the front row seats. Shortly after, the whole tower began to shake. A lot. Groaning and grimacing, Ashen forced himself to sit up, and using his arm, slowly retreated until he was leaning his upper body against Cecilia's leg. "A friend?" he asked, looking up with a worried expression. "I think she missed you more than I thought," chuckled Cecilia. Another dragon growl resonated, higher pitched. After more shaking, the tower stopped moving. It was only a second before the roof was suddenly torn off. It happened so violently and quickly, it looked as if it had simply been popped up, the whole ceiling disappearing in one go. The roof was literally sent flying God knows where, while stones from the top of the torn walls were falling down the sides, in or out of the room. The tower itself trembled again, and a gigantic dragon's face appeared above them. Ashen gasped. "That can't be." "Cease!" he exclaimed, a baffled expression stuck on his face. The silver dragon answered with a gentle growl, before turning its large ruby eyes toward the Yekarus soldiers that had just appeared. Raising their spears and swords, the men were suddenly not so sure about attacking anymore. Cease let out that strange scream, and most of them took a step back, unsure. "Good girl," chuckled Ashen, clearly the only man happy to see the dragon. Luckily, the tower they were in was much bigger than the one Jin had destroyed, and a bit sturdier. As Cease suddenly put a gigantic paw on the ground, the floor squeaked dangerously, but it held well under the pressure. The dragon's head was right above the half-torn wall, and Cecilia guessed her dragon was probably supporting itself against the whole tower. Cease was way too big to get inside, but the dragon would still make a trustworthy support against more enemies. Meanwhile, Ashen was still visibly in awe. He leaned against the silver-scaled paw. "You're so big now. I missed you too, pretty girl." Cease must have enjoyed the compliment, because he received a gentle growl and slight nudge in response. "Ashen, you shouldn't move too much." Just as she said that, Cecilia watched him fight against his own body to get back up, although he immediately leaned against Ceci's head, patting the dragon's snout. A happy Cease let out a gentle, soft growl. "No way," he grimaced. "I'm done napping, I just needed a minute to catch up. I can't just stay still when we've got company, can I?" One of the Yekarus soldiers, braver than the others, suddenly decided to attack despite the dragon. With a yell, he ran forward with his sword. Ashen only raised his leg with the right timing for the man to brutally run chest first into his foot, losing his breath, and stumble back. The king moved immediately to grab his spear from him, swinging the weapon around. He made a circular motion with it, stabbing the soldier's shoulder, and threw him right into Sesay's mouth. The dragon, who had opened its mouth in a timely manner, immediately closed it, chewing with a satisfied expression. "See," smiled Ashen, his eyes on the men. "I'll handle it just fine." Cecilia was still worried, not about his skill, but by the fact that he needed to lean against her dragon to be capable of standing. She knew Cease had also probably come back because of her own worry for Ashen. Her dragon was naturally responding to her true feelings. However, Cecilia had resolved to not doubt him anymore, and she knew that Cease wouldn't allow anyone to injure him either. Right now, those soldiers were her lesser concern. She had to finish this fight, and for that, she had to get rid of the main enemy, Lord Yebek. The hateful man was still standing on the opposite side of the tower, his shocked eyes still on the dragon. Then, he shifted to Ashen, a grin appearing on his lips. This foolish man is only hurrying his demise. He might be acting like a tough fighter, but the poison will kill him anyway. "I won't let that happen," retorted Cecilia. She didn't have a single minute more to lose with empty talking and threats. She ran toward Yebek, swinging her sword with more resolve than ever. She knew she could finish this fight, she just had to find the right timing. Strangely, Cecilia was having flashbacks of her training days while wielding her sword against Lord Yebek. Her full attention was on this fight, but while facing one of the few people in this world who is actually on the same level as one of the war god's children, she couldn't help but remember her days in the North Army camp. Their father had never let them rely on their strength alone. She had already fought against men bigger than she was, twice more experienced, or with the most dangerous weapon. Every time, her own strength hadn't been enough to simply win. There was no battle won with only speed, strength, or technique. Cecilia knew she should never underestimate anyone, and she wasn't letting Yebeka's vicious attacks get to her. She was standing her ground, offering him a real duel, not withholding her attacks, and not showing any gaps in her defense either. Her movements were precise, perfect. It was as if she was literally dancing around the room, trying to get the upper hand of this fight. It wasn't just about wielding a sword bigger than herself. Cecilia was using her whole body in each attack, all of her strength and focus. Yebek was sweating and getting frustrated. Although he did think that woman could potentially give him a challenge, he was a man drunk on over 30 years of experience. Unlike Cecilia, he wasn't humble enough to realize a girl twice younger could possibly push him past his limits. Cecilia was his daughter's age, but making him sweat and tremble like he was back in his training days. No, in fact, he was slowly realizing how terrifying this woman was. No woman this young should have this much potential. She wasn't fighting like a young maiden with a bit of good training, she was fighting like an experienced sword master, and making him feel like a student. The sword fight between the two was turning into one of the best duels that could ever be witnessed. They were both incredibly fast, violent, and relentless. Even the Yekara soldiers and Ashen couldn't help but glance to the side several times, as if mesmerized by the superb choreography going on across the room. It was almost as if the two of them had rehearsed this beforehand, offering a ballet of blood and death. Each attack was potentially deadly, and only avoided by a hair, or blocked with equally impressive strength. Their movements were even hard for the eye to keep up with, as they only froze for seconds when their swords clashed, pressed against each other, and neither won, so they parted with a promise to try and kill each other again. They barely caught any breaks, and waited until they were steps away from each other, as if the short breaks had to be mutually agreed on. Only the most experienced soldiers could tell Cecilia was starting to get the upper hand in this battle. The princess was tired too, her body covered in sweat and blood, but she wasn't willing to stop at all. She was also doing an impressive job of keeping Yebek cornered where she wanted him to be, as if she was making the rules and choosing the physical limits of their fight. No one would have dared to intrude, anyway. The soldiers were almost happy to face the king and the dragon rather than this woman that seemed possessed by death itself. She was like a goddess of war, as beautiful as she was scary, and unpacifiable. Foolish was the one who ever dared to take a single step in her path. Yebek himself was barely surviving. The man was sweating twice as much as Cecilia, visibly out of breath, his limbs beginning to shake from the overexertion. The fight had insidiously shifted into more of a mental battle between the two. Physically, they were probably capable of remaining on an equal level, but psychologically, Cecilia was starting to make the man lose his ground. It was down to which one of them would admit defeat first, and Yebek was slowly pushing past his own limits. He refused to admit how scary that woman was, while his whole body was about to beg for mercy. It was one leap he refused to take. He refused to be scared of her, but Cecilia was starting to grow into this furious, scary creature standing before him. The dragon that manifested in her furious movements, glowing green eyes, and powerful attacks was growing scarier every second. It was as if the more they fought, the more he discovered the dangerous beast behind the gentle woman. The more he pushed her, the more powerful she became, and soon, she'd devour him whole. He couldn't understand. When did this foolish, weak, and stuttering woman grow into this fearsome monster? How could he lose? He, who had fought so long and so hard to get here. He had trained, relentlessly, day and night for years, only to be bested by a child? He just couldn't understand. No, he refused to admit he had already lost. Stumbling back, exhausted, scared, defeated, the man began to lose his grip on his weapon. His brain was screaming he had to run, to flee this place, far from those green eyes. He stumbled again and fell down, his eyes opened wide in horror. Cecilia knew she had won already. She slowly lowered her sword, pointing it toward his chest, and walked toward him. The man retreated, desperate, and suddenly, his hand touched something liquid and warm. Blood. He finally looked around, realizing he was in the middle of his own men's bodies. They were all dead, or dying with a limb or two torn off. The man gasped, as if he was horrified for the very first time by all the deaths he had caused. His terrified eyes went back to Cecilia. He could almost see it. Behind that girl, the shadow of a warrior, that dark aura that belonged to the real monster, the war god who had forged his daughter into a being as terrifying as himself. Yebek could see it now. That child wasn't enhanced by her dragon blood, but by the teachings of the best fighter of all. The one who had earned his title of war god. Who was he, a mere mortal, to think he could ever stand a chance against that? Please, he begged, completely out of it. I'm sorry. I'll stop. I'll stop. I'm sorry. I beg you. To his surprise, Cecilia actually stopped walking. Her green eyes weren't betraying anything, and for a fateful second, he really thought he could beg for his life to be spared. That was it. She was still a woman, a young child who could be begged, convinced, swayed. She had to have some pity for the weak, some mercy. If he could convince her to let him go, then he'd be able to survive this, and then a large hand suddenly covered his vision. He felt himself being brutally pulled backwards, and his back violently hit the cold metal of armor. You don't deserve to be spared, you, whispered a voice next to his ear. You've got to pay for all the lives you sacrificed. Ashen put the blade against his neck, and mercilessly sliced his throat. Yebek only made one throaty sound, and fell forward, his face in his men's blood, his eyes still wide open. He was dead. Cecilia let out a long sigh. It's over, she muttered. Ashen nodded, but right after, he grimaced and fell backwards. Cease moved immediately, and he landed gently against the dragon's snout with a grunt. Cecilia ran to his side, checking on him. Are you all right? I'm feeling great, he lied. I would have taken him, but I figured you should have the fun. Oh, poison. It's all right. Just lie down. No, actually, let's get on Cease and take you to the Hashit family, they'll have what you need. You did well, she added with a gentle kiss against his cheek. Thanks. We'll just pretend that's true when your cousin's around, please? I don't mind my queen saving the day, but I know she's going to give me hell for just lying there, and my ego can only take so much bruising at once. Ashen, stop talking. Just get on. The truth was, Cecilia knew he was already in a bad condition when they had gotten here. It was impressive he had managed so well and won against dozens of men when most wouldn't even have been able to get up. Even with the dose of poison he had received, she thought he was still surprisingly fine. He could barely stand, and his complexion wasn't too good, but she had really feared for his life all along. Even now, he was still standing and gently pushed her hand away when she was trying to have him get on the silver dragon. No, he said. We have to stop the fights first. We can have Cease do it after. For now. No, we have to stop the Yekara from fighting. Now, he insisted. To Cecilia's surprise, he walked away from her, and stumbled all the way to Yebeka's body, grabbing the dead man by his hair. His eyes stopped for a moment to glance at his adopted brother. For a very brief moment, Cecilia thought she saw a melancholic expression in his eyes, but when he turned around, it was already gone. He walked back up to her, pulling Yebeka's body. What are you going to do? She asked, confused. I have a formula that works. Let's get to the plaza. Cecilia helped him get on Cease. The silver dragon tried to take a bite of Yebeka's body, without success, and took off with an annoyed growl. As they rose higher in the sky, they both got a better view of the half-destroyed castle. It was truly a mess down there, with 2 towers wrecked, and possibly much more damage than they could see. I'm sorry, she muttered. Don't worry. I never really liked this place anyway, and we can always build a better one. One you'll enjoy living in." Cecilia smiled and nodded. It would have almost been a romantic moment if they didn't have a third and dead passenger with them. Cease effortlessly took them to the plaza where the fight was still going on, although clearly ending. Just like they had already predicted, the Yekara were unwilling to stop fighting despite their defeat growing more and more obvious. That's when Ashen pushed Rebecca's body off Cece's back. It took a couple of seconds to violently hit the ground below, provoking a surprise amongst the fighters. Everybody stopped, as the body had been dropped right in the middle of the plaza. The closest people immediately recognized his face, and soon, the word spread that Lord Yebek was dead. "Yekara!" shouted Ashen. "Your leader is dead. If you don't drop your weapons now, you will all suffer the same fate." It took a few seconds, and many of the Yekara fighters gathered to see the body for themselves. Some exchanged words between themselves, but as soon as one of them dropped their weapons, many others did the same. Soon enough, they saw many pairs of hands in the air, the Yekara troops capitulating. Cecilia found her cousin on the other side, who was grimacing, shaking her sword. "Ceci, you party pooper! Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.